1921. The royal yacht, the Victoria and Albert, steams into Belfast. King George V is greeted by loyal Protestants in the 6 counties of Northern Ireland. Although under the authority of the Westminster government, Northern Ireland had its own parliament. The king was here to open it. Across a decade of trouble, whilst Catholic Ireland had fought for independence, Protestants here had striven to remain within the United Kingdom. In an independent Ireland, these Protestants would have been a minority in a profoundly Catholic country where the Church wielded great influence.
They saw United Ireland as a place where the Roman Catholic Church would influence the decisions of the state, and this was something they were totally opposed to. They wanted a place where they could practice their own religion without interference from the Roman Catholic Church. They didn't see this developing in the new state of the 26 counties, and therefore were opposed to it. And I think that it's true to say that what existed then, this attitude of mind, still exists today in the minds of the Protestants.
But Catholics in Northern Ireland, a third of the population, did not welcome the king and the British connection he symbolised. To them, the partition of Ireland was unacceptable. So hostile were they that there were fears for the king's safety. Indeed, as he drove through the Belfast streets, there were scuffles in the crowds. Like their compatriots in the south, they had wanted an end to British rule and a united republic of all Ireland. But now they were anxious for their position as a minority within the new Protestant province.
The northern state wasn't created out of thin air. They knew the background of the people who were going to control this state. Belfast throughout the 19th century had been notorious for anti-Catholic riots and for discrimination. Belfast Corporation had been fairly notorious for discrimination against Catholics. So they expected the new regime, or anticipated the new regime made up of the same people who had run Belfast before 1920 would carry on the same policies, except now they would have the full power of a semi-sovereign government to do it with.
In the same week as the king opened Parliament, Northern Ireland notables were pictured at Lord Londonderry's garden party. But these scenes were deceptive. The Northern Ireland state faced the implacable hostility of the South. 25% of its population were out of work, and violent confrontations between Protestants and Catholics threatened civil war. These unionist politicians, who were to preside over Northern Ireland for 50 years, faced the problem that a substantial proportion of the population objected to the new state's very existence. One phase of the Irish troubles had left, as its legacy, the roots of another. Protestants rejoiced in their new position in a united kingdom. As well as the new Belfast Assembly, the people of Northern Ireland had elected their local government. The Constitution protected the Catholic minority with proportional representation, an electoral system that assured minorities of representation in proportion to their size. In the border areas around Berwick, the Irish Republican Army, the IRA, was fighting an effective guerrilla war. Raids, shootings, and kidnapping were almost daily occurrences. In these same areas, nationalist Catholic councils had been elected and had promptly refused to accept the legitimacy of the Belfast government. In the areas with a Catholic majority, shown here in green, there were nationalist councils. Nearly a third of the province's local government was giving allegiance to the Southern Parliament. So civil disobedience and guerrilla war threatened to make the state ungovernable.
The reaction of the Protestants to the rebel councils in 1921-22 was one of fear, I believe, that if the rebel councils, the councils that existed at that time, who were openly defying central government, who openly stated that their allegiance was to the Parliament of the South and not to the new Parliament of the North, then the central government and Protestants themselves felt that these people would have to be controlled, that if they got away with what they were attempting to do, that they would destroy the state itself.
When the new state was set up, it was set up against the wishes of the majority of the Irish people, including those who controlled these councils, the nationalists who controlled these councils. They saw no reason to accept the new state. The justification given for setting up the new state was that this was the wish of the people in the northeast of Ireland. But if that was to be the case, if you were to take self-determination in limited areas, well, then the people in Tyrone and Fermanagh and in Derry City said they, by a majority, wished to be included in an all-Ireland state. So why should they be brought under this new state?
So with nationalist councils like Londonderry declaring allegiance to the south, the situation in the province grew tense. Earlier rioting in Derry left 18 people dead. 1,500 troops were needed to keep peace in a town of 40,000. 1 soldier for every 27 people. With the Protestants besieged and Catholics aggrieved, there was sectarian violence throughout the province. The worst in Belfast, where a protracted campaign of terror was unleashed on the Catholic community, remembered to this day.
You'd be lying in bed as a kid at night, you'd hear a lorry suddenly coming along the street, and next thing you hear pounding on the doors and footsteps inside and hoarse voices, and people had been trailed out, probably arrested. You didn't know whether they'd been arrested or whether they'd been taken away to be shot by a body that was known as the murder gang at that time.
If someone had been taken by the police or if someone was murdered, well, there would be what we say in Irish, the keening, the women crying. You may have heard the expression. And then if we heard the keening, then we knew that someone had been murdered by the forces.
And I trailed them out of bed, and they shouted down for their mother to come up the stairs, and she went up. And they shot them 5 sons out of cold blood right along, one by one, in the following hall. Shot them dead and wanted her to witness.
In fact, in the morning paper, your parents would read out some item that somebody had been found in the fields with their hands tied with rosary beads, or a little sign hung around their heads, a spy, or something like that. In fact, my own teacher at St. Paul's School, I remember one weekend on my way to Mass, hearing that he, in fact, had been murdered that weekend.
He used to come down our street every morning, 7 o'clock, whistling with the ladders. So everybody missed Malachy this morning. There was no post. And the next thing we got the paper. Malachy halfpenny. My God, such a death to give that boy. May God forgive the hand that done it. They cut the privates out of him. They tied him to the tree. And then they shot him after he'd done his sufferings.